This is part 2 of a challenge to Christians to explain their beliefs about hell. And I know I said in the next video I would be talking about how Jesus felt about it, but we've got a ways to go before we exactly get to that. There is an intertestamental period where a lot of literature was written by Jews from the Babylonian captivity. This literature was produced during the 400 years between Malachi and Matthew. And there's a lot of different views that were written then about the fate of the wicked. Some texts describe the unending conscious torment of the lost, while others reflect the Old Testament view that the wicked cease to exist. So which ones of these contrasting views would most likely come from Hellenistic culture pressure that the Jews were under, or their beliefs in the Old Testament writings before they went into captivity? Unfortunately, most people are not aware of the different views because the traditional teachings generally argue for a uniform Jewish view of final punishment as eternal, and that is as a torment that lasts forever. Since Jesus and the apostles didn't denounce these teachings from this intertestamental period, Christians today assume that such a view was accepted by them or endorsed by them. This assumption is based on fantasy rather than facts. When you look at eternal torment, the second book of Ezra, which was an apocryphal book accepted as canonical by the Roman Catholic Church, asks if the souls of the lost will be tortured immediately at death or after a renewal of creation. God answers, as the spirit leaves the body, if it is one of those who have shown scorn and have not kept the way of the Most High, such spirits shall wander about in torment, ever grieving and sad. They will consider the torment laid up for themselves in the last days. The same view is expressed in Judith, another apocryphal book included in the Roman Catholic Bible. In closing her song of victory, the heroine Judith warns, "Woe to the nations that rise up against my race. The Lord Almighty will take vengeance on them in the day of judgment, to put fire and worms in their flesh, and they shall weep and feel pain forever." The reference to the fire and worms probably comes from Isaiah 66 that we talked about in the first video. But while Isaiah saw the dead bodies consumed by fire and worms, Judas speaks of fire and worms as causing internal, unending agonies inside the flesh. Here we have an unmistakable description of today's traditional view of hell. A similar description of fate of the wicked is found in 4 Maccabees, written by a Jewish Stoic learned Jew. The author describes the righteous ascending to conscious bliss at death and the wicked descending to conscious torment. He tells the story of the faithful mother and her 7 sons, who were all martyred under the tyranny of Epiphanes. The 7 sons repeatedly warned their wicked torturer of the eternal torment that awaits him. Divine vengeance is reserved for you, eternal fire and torments, which shall cling to you for all time. The danger of eternal torment is laid up for those who transgress the commandments of God. So there we have a couple of apocrypha books talking about eternal torment as an accepted doctrine, especially by the Catholic Church during that 400 years, in that interim between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Then you have total annihilation. Some apocrypha books, sinners are consumed as in the Old Testament. In Tobit, which was written about 200 BC, describes the end time, saying, all the children of Israel that are delivered in those days, remembering God in truth, shall be gathered together and come to Jerusalem, and they shall dwell in the land of Abraham with security. And they that do sin and unrighteousness shall cease from the earth. The same view is expressed in Sirach, called also Ecclesiasticus, which speaks of the glowing fire in which the wicked will be devoured and find destruction. The Sibylline Oracles, which was a composite work, the core of which comes from Jewish author, or perhaps the 2nd century BC, describes how God will carry out the total destruction of the wicked, and he shall burn the whole earth and consume the whole race of men, and there shall be sooty dust. The Psalms of Solomon, most likely composed by Hasidic Jews in the middle of the 1st century BC, anticipates a time when the wicked will vanish from the earth, never to be remembered. The destruction of the sinner is forever, and he shall not be remembered when the righteous is visited. This is the portion of the sinners forever. So, you have some apocrypha books that believe in eternal torment, and you have some that believe in that the wicked will cease as if they had never been, never to be remembered. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian that lived, I think he was born around the time Christ was crucified. And traditionalists often cite Josephus' description of the Essenes' belief about the immortality of the soul and the eternal punishment of the wicked to support their contention that such a belief was widely accepted in the New Testament times. But if you look closely at the text from Josephus, before you decide on the conclusion, Josephus tells us that the Essenes adopted from the Greeks not only the notion that the souls are immortal and continue forever, but also the belief that the good souls have their habitation beyond the ocean in a region where the weather is perfect, while bad souls are cast in a dark, tempestuous den full of never-ceasing punishments. Josephus explains that such a belief derives from Greek fables and is built on the supposition that the souls are immortal and that bad men suffer immortal punishment after death. He calls such beliefs an unavoidable bait for such as have once had a taste of this kind of Greek philosophy. It's significant that Josephus attributes the belief in the immortality of the soul and in unending punishment not to the teachings of the Old Testament, but to Greek fables, which sectarian Jews, like the Essenes, found irresistible. When Josephus makes this comment, and such a comment presupposes that not all the Jews had accepted these beliefs. In fact, indications are that even among the Essenes were those who did not share these beliefs. You have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are generally associated with the Essenes, speak clearly of total annihilation of the sinners. The Damascus documents, those were important Dead Sea Scrolls, describes the end of sinners by comparing their fate to that of those who perished in the flood and of the unfaithful Israelites who fell in the wilderness. God's punishment of sinners leaves no remnant remaining of them or survivor. They will be as though they had not been. The same view is expressed in another scroll called the Manual of Discipline, which speaks of the extermination of the men of Satan by means of eternal fire. It's noteworthy that the Manual of Discipline describes the punishment of those who follow the spirit of perversity instead of the spirit of truth in an apparent contradictory way, namely an unending punishment which results in total destruction. Very contradictory. The text states, "And as for the visitation of all who walk in this spirit, the spirit of perversity, it consists of an abundance of blows administered by all the angels of destruction in the everlasting pit by the furious wrath of God of vengeance, an unending dread and shame without end, and of disgrace of destruction by the fire of the region of darkness, and all their time from age to age are in most sorrowful chagrin and bitterness, misfortunate and calamities of darkness, till they are destroyed, with none of them surviving or escaping." So here you have the unending dread and shame without end is not unending, but lasts only till they are destroyed. And it goes to show that in New Testament times, people use such terms as unending, without end, or eternal with a different meaning than we have today. Today, unending punishment means without end, and not until they're destroyed. If you recognize this fact, it's essential for interpreting the sayings of Jesus about eternal fire and for resolving the apparent contradiction we find in the New Testament between everlasting punishment and everlasting destruction. When it comes to the punishment of the wicked, unending simply means until they are destroyed. Jesus tells us who the wicked were, who his adversary Satan was. And he tells us of a destruction that was coming upon those people. He tells us that for those people there was a broad way that led to destruction and a narrow way that led to life. When Christians interpret this, for us today, it leads to all kinds of problems in their belief. It leads to all kinds of denial of Jesus' success, his victory in that first century, and carries it on into our day. If you look at these intertestamental literature and see how they indicate that in that period of time there was no consistent Jewish view of the fate of the wicked. Most of those documents reflect the Old Testament view of total extinction of sinners, but yet some clearly speak of an unending torment of the wicked. This means that you can't read the words of Jesus or the New Testament writers assuming that they reflect any kind of uniform beliefs in eternal torment held by Jews at that time. You have to examine the teachings of the New Testament, the teachings of Jesus and his apostles, on the basis of its own internal witness. In the next video, I'll be speaking about the witness of Jesus.